Hey guys, welcome to The Secret History, Living in Your Aquarium. This is Alexander Williamson. I am here to talk to you about the biggest thing in the world, reproduction. So, we're going to be talking about sex and gender in fish. I have a background as an anthropologist, so I understand sex and gender in a little bit different way than maybe the mainstream terms used. And so for this, we're going to be going with the terms used in this article, which is groundbreaking, brand new science that has never seen the light of day before this. I mean, it totally shatters our conceptions of what sex and gender, I guess indirectly, are. But as an anthropologist, gender is the expression of sex. So sex is what you're born with, either gonads, ovaries, you produce sperm or eggs, or you're intersex or hermaphrodite. Being that gender is the stereotype associated with culture or society of how each of those behave and then whom they are attracted to and what that behavior manifests like. Now in fish, this term is very relevant in my opinion because you've got some fish like guppies that can be sneaker males. So for instance, they may genetically be male sex. They may, and in humans, male is XY chromosome, female is XX chromosome. It gets much more complicated than that. In rare situations, less than 1%, humans get 3 chromosomes. And in the case of humans, it is the presence of the Y chromosome which will always dictate someone being male, essentially. So if you've got the Y chromosome, you're going to have that male DNA, essentially. There are other versions that are, XXXY, and then there are, XXX, XXXX 4 times, 3 times. There's all sorts of different things that can occur as quote-unquote errors, but they're within the natural world of happening. And in fish, it appears that some of these things are very common. Now, we've understood the XY thing to be kind of the full extent of determining the sex of a fish or human or whatever. Well, earlier this year, we talked about this in a recent episode, they found a frog in Taiwan. It had 6 chromosomes involved in dictating gender. There were, or sex or gender. So their sex happened to be male or female, and they happened to present in 2 ways that they noticed, which was either the male, bright, colorful pattern that was singing and muscular, or the female, which had a bigger belly and was a little more peaceful, didn't spar with other frogs. And so them behaving that way, as far as they observed, there were just 2 genders, 2 sexes. But each one had 6 chromosomes involved in determining that. Now there were still only 2 combinations of those 6 chromosomes that equaled male and female, and who's to say that maybe there are species out there where they might have 6 different sexes. Maybe there's some that have 2 sets of male organs and 2 sets of female organs and they're all viable. We just haven't discovered that yet, or we haven't understood it that way yet. Now, this new science actually may change that. And it definitely changes the way we understand life as a whole. But for fish as a whole, it blows our minds. It shatters everything. So we'll get to this article, which is a condensed version of this just thrilling new information that really flips science on its head. And there's been clues, there's been indications. I've talked about this in my sex and gender talks on fish. And really quick, getting back to gender, the reason we're still going to mention gender as an anthropological term or a scientific term, biology term, is because, say for instance, guppies. Male guppies, either they're born flashy and strong and they grow fast and they get really colorful and they do their dance and they pester the females all the time and they spar with other males and they're very, as many people would say, alpha. Well, there's another set of guppies in any given population that stay very effeminate or kind kind of prepubescent, if you want to think of it that way. They're not expressing the characteristics typically that males would express if they're able to reproduce. Only juveniles and or females look that way. They're more of a bland silver color. They're smaller. They've got a bigger belly. But it turns out that some fraction, usually around 20% of these males are fully fertile. They just have a different evolutionary tactic. They wait for the flashy guys who may get eaten sooner in the wild to expend all their energy, show off for the females. Females get in the mood, and then right before they're ready to mate, those sneaky males, or as we call them in the fish hobby oftentimes, sneaker males, will sneak in, mate with the female, and peace out before the other male can beat them up. And because they're not as colorful and things like that, kind of cleverness gets passed on rather than big macho-ness. So there's a lot of different strategies in the natural world, and that's just one example of where you could say that there were two genders of the male sex in guppies, and that would be gender. That would be both genders. In that case, you could argue are heterosexual or interested in the female fish, but there may also be gay guppies, for lack of a better term, homosexual guppies. And it's found that guppies spend more time dancing for one another. Males, they spend 65% of their time, we talked about that in Fish News last month, dancing for other males rather than for females. Take the females out of the picture, they still do their mating dance. So hold on one moment, we need a break from our sponsor, our reluctant sponsor, that doesn't give me money or anything. Diabetes. So, back to fish. So, we've known for a long time that there are variations in gender that just blow our mind. We know birds have also not just X and Y chromosomes, but Z and W chromosomes. Okay, getting confusing. We got frog with 6 chromosomes and birds with other letters, and what next? Well, what next is the weirdest of all, and that is that it turns out that the chromosomes X and Y don't necessarily determine the sex, in fish anyways. So you could have a fish born with female chromosomes, whereas in humans, you could have the female chromosomes, you're going to be female. You may have some sort of hermaphroditic expression because of either a chromosome issue or a genetic issue, and that expresses itself in several ways. It could be just breast tissue on a male, or it could be reproductive organs that are non-functional or semi-formed in the body. And that is how it is usually expressed. But once in a while, you get fully functional reproductive parts from both genders in different species and animals and things. And in humans, having some amount of hermaphroditism is actually 1% of the population has some level. Now, most will never know. It may just be a little chunk of organ tissue in your stomach or something, and you'd never know that you have a partial ovary, big manly dude otherwise. So, in any case, we're going to move on from humans. And before we hop into all of this, I want to just explain really quickly, because this article is going to go into switching sexes, but it also refers to it as switching gender. So for the meantime, I know I just explained why I think gender is slightly different, but we're going to say it might get switched up. So if you hear the word gender, assume it just means the biological sex of that creature. But in hermaphroditism that is able to reproduce, that is fertile, which in humans is extraordinarily rare. Sequential hermaphroditism is very common in other species, though, other animals. And in fish, everything from danios, clownfish, knifefish, race, bass, perch, carp, angelfish of the saltwater, all races or wrasses, Asian sheep's heads, pea puffers, gobiodon and perigobiodon, they are all known to switch sexes, or as the article may say, because the gal writing probably isn't an anthropologist or scientist, they switch genders. Now, the way they're doing this, we've always assumed is that they were born with extra chromosomes. So we just assume some amount of them, snails or crawfish or whatever, if they're a hermaphrodite, that they have X, Y chromosomes and they're choosing to express one over the other, and there's some genetic gene on either the X or the Y that determines which one's getting expressed, and something in their environment can cause that to change. Well, now we're finding that it is not just the simple presence of the Y chromosome that makes them male. It is something genetic and something that may not even be on that chromosome, on the 23rd chromosome, or whichever chromosome it's on in pair of chromosomes it's on in fish. So in sequential hermaphroditism, really quick, we've got protogyny, which is female to male. We've got protoandry, which is born male, then turns female. And then we've got serial bidirectionality, and that is when something like, for instance, in snails, they're born female, they have ovaries with fertile eggs, they go through basically puberty, and all of a sudden they develop gonads. Those produce viable sperm. Within 2 weeks, they fertilize their own eggs. Within a week, they fertilize their own eggs. Then within a week, they switch back to female, give birth, and then they can repeat the process. They can switch back and forth. Cloning is that's kind of a fourth column or a second column, fourth option, where you're replicating your own DNA. And Amazon mollies and things like that, there's also another version. If you want to learn about hermaphroditism and that stuff, check out one of my most recent videos. I can probably link it at the end, or also just look back a month or so and you should find the video where I talk all about sex, gender, and fish. But the reason we think that this happens, evolutionarily so, is due to a hypothesis known as the sexual advantage hypothesis, and it states that if you are a larger animal, you have a higher chance at producing more babies. And essentially saying that if it's a female, the biggest female possible can hold the most babies. So if males of the species are way bigger, it would be easy for a male of that species to switch to female, hold a ton of babies, and outnumber all the babies that could have been had by the teeny females in that species otherwise. Now, the reason we have small or sexual dimorphism, changes in male versus female sizes in species, is usually an evolutionarily selected thing. There may be a very good reason why females are small and males are big, or vice versa. But this hypothesis states that it's kind of a caloric thing, and that's how in science, in anthropology, that's how they've kind of looked at it a lot. It's a trade-off for the calories and energy used and consumed in a life form. How helpful is it to the next generation, to furthering that life form's existence? Is that trait, and you follow that path, kind of this logical method. Now, the last thing I need to tell you before we read the article that tells you the details about this, and it happens to be about bettas, which is kind of cool because I think we all can wrap our heads around bettas pretty well, is that we've also got your epigenetics and your genetics and your phenotype. So we've got phenotype and genotype. Phenotype is how you outwardly express. So you may have the genes that say you have blue skin. You may have the genes that say you have red skin. But one could be dominant recessive, or recessive. One could be incomplete dominant. And so you can pass on your genes and pass on a different phenotype. That's how kids are born with different color eyes, or different color hair, or straight hair, or curly hair, when their parents don't have it. It's a recessive thing. If it's dominant, your genotype and phenotype match. So just going over that again, may have been a long time since you guys have heard those terms since, biology and in elementary or middle school or high school or whatnot. So, moving on from there, epigenetics is the ability to turn on and off different genetic markers. This is a very new field of study, maybe a decade old, but basically what it says is that species, organisms, that we have switches within our genetic code, and we can switch them on or off, and different things then happen in our phenotype, but our genotype always stayed the same. So it's almost like you have a secret code written into your genes. Cancer is a good example probably of what's going on with this. So cancer may be that you had this latent gene that wasn't expressing, and when it gets flipped, when this trigger gets flipped in your DNA, all of a sudden the cells start regenerating too fast and they spiral out of control, build a tumor, on and on. Another way to look at it would be the change going into puberty. When you're born, when you're a little kid, you have one set of genetics. When you die, you have another set of genetics, or the same set of genetics, but another look. You're old, you're wrinkled, you may have arthritis, you may have osteoporosis, all these issues. You may have cataracts. Those are things that have happened to your physical body over time. When you go through puberty, your genetic code, it's the same. If they took your DNA, it's still the same printout, essentially. There may be slight differences, but they're very minute. And all of a sudden, you're this different creature. Your voice lowers if you're a male, you grow tissue places if you're a female. And a male, too. Whatever. So you guys know how puberty works. I'm not going into that. But let's start reading about this now that you've got all that in your head. And you can go back and look at my other videos if you want to double back on that. But I just want to say that this article was really well written. Really, we're not going to read the whole thing. We're just going to go over the high points of it because you guys are getting what I'm saying, I hope. But basically, this is from the Atlantic magazine or newspaper, whatever you want to call it now, in this day and age, from their online publication. And it's in their science section. And the title is The Surprise Hiding in the DNA of Pet Fish. Domestic betta fish have evolved a sex gene not found in wild fish of their species. So another note about wild versus domestic. When I said that there are alpha males and beta males, when I was talking about the sneaker males in the guppies, it turns out that the guy who coined the term alpha male for wolves in the 1970s doing research, he was studying captured and caged stressed wolves. And in the wild, they don't behave that way. So by the 1990s, he was already writing work saying, don't use the term alpha male, alpha female. It's not right. It can rotate. It's a changing thing. It depends on too many other dynamics. And really, it's more of a monarchy or a collective, and it's always changing. When they studied wolves in the wild, they behaved totally differently. So, in any case, just keep that in your mind. And the other thing to keep in your mind as we're talking about this is when we talked about hermaphroditism, how does it get triggered? So what triggers a snail to go from male to female, or what triggers a fish to go to male to female? Well, it is a stress hormone. So first, cortisone and cortisol levels go up. They're stressed. So evolutionarily, whatever it is, they've been told stress out. Now, what causes that stress can vary. It could be predation, it could be drought, lack of food, it could be that they're in a crappy condition living-wise, and they're in their little, PetSmart 2-gallon tank, and they should be in a giant tank because they're a red-tailed catfish that you got for $5, whatever. Not doing commentary today, I'll stop there. But whatever it may be, it shows that. So the stress then causes a chemical called aromatase or aromatase. I don't know how to pronounce it, but aromatase, and then that decreases the estrogen. So it's almost always a decrease in estrogen. Then either increase in testosterone happens, or there is a change in the epigenetics, and ovaries form if it's a male, and testosterone stops being made. Or if it's a female, testosterone gets made, and all of a sudden gonads develop. So it's a stress response. We know that much. And stress, it could be that all the males are dead. They don't sense any testosterone in the water, and now all of a sudden the biggest female, according to that theory that we talked about, the size theory, thinks, I better switch it up. I better become, I better become that role. I better fill that role in whichever way benefits the species the most in the future. So in 1975, scientists tried spaying and neutering a few hundred betta fish. Out of all the females, they became sterile immediately. Betta fish are different, though, in the long run from cats and dogs. A third of the surviving bettas regenerated an ovary. So the females that were spayed, they grew back an ovary eventually and were able to reproduce and have babies again after losing it. However, 2/3 came back as male with gonads. Over half of them came back with fertile sperm. Scientists thought, this is really weird. So they grew elongated fins, brighter colors, they gained size, and they started making bubble nests. They expressed gender rather than just sex too. So they changed their behavior, they changed their look, they changed their presentation. They started doing mating dances and getting aggressive towards other males and things like that. Well, when they looked at them and they mated them, that generation of fish, they mated them with other female betta fish. These females produced offspring that looked perfectly healthy. However, there was one notable oddity, which was all the resulting brood tended to be female. So, vastly so, like 90%. So, from this, scientists in 1975 threw their hands up and said, we don't know how fish work. Clearly something weird's going on. This doesn't happen with wild bettas. And what may have happened is it may have scrambled the chromosome X and Y from determining the sex of the organism. It may be that they selected bright colors so often, same within guppies, that now the females have all this color in their fins now too. That wasn't present in the wild, and that we forced it so many times that eventually an error occurred that said, you know what, sex organs and the color of the fins shouldn't really be linked. Doesn't really matter if they are. And so when an error occurred that unlinked those and copied that gene into another part, or different altogether or omitted altogether, it then just stuck and it passed on as dominant because it wasn't detrimental, and humans kept forcing these interactions. So how fish become male and female is far weirder and more varied than the XX chromosome for female and XY chromosome for male system that humans have. Even though humans can get complicated as well, clownfish, for example, are all born male. But one male in a group will irreversibly turn into a dominant female. Protogyny. In the Atlantic silversides, sex is influenced by water temperature. Warm water means males, cold water means females. In a family of fish called cichlids, y'all know cichlids, it says that some species have sex chromosomes similar to that of humans, while others closely relate to that of birds. At least 20 sex determination strategies have been found in the fish family, in fish family alone, and specifically over 20 in the cichlids too. Thomas Coker, a biologist at the University of Maryland at College Park, said he expects that many more are still undiscovered. So there's probably many, many more combinations, just like that frog they just discovered. It's one of the biggest questions still out there in evolutionary biology at the moment, says Manfred Schartel, a developmental biologist at the University of Würzburg in Germany. Betta fish, it turns out, may be a case study in how novel sex determination strategy emerges. 2 new studies just coming out this May suggest that pet betta fish evolved a sex determination gene that does not work in the same way that wild bettas do. That way that they determine sex is very, very happened quickly across the evolutionary tree. Betta fish seem like an extreme case of this change occurring within 50 years, maybe 100, maybe 150 years. At most, people have been really breeding bettas 150 years for fighting and for ornamental use. But now biologists out of University of Antwerp recently co-authored a paper, and they found that in this extreme case of sexual determination changing within a species, in our breed to breed more beautiful fish as well as more aggressive fish. So it could have been selecting a very, very typically male trait. Maybe they got a hermaphroditic female that was acting male in her gender, but her sex was female. So maybe they took her, and she happened to be one of those 1 in a billion, 1 in a million, whatever it is, and was able to reproduce. But that right there threw off the whole game chromosome-wise. And so now, when we look at it, domestic bettas come in a dizzying array of colors and shapes, but much less so in the wild. This is because of how much we've, worked with them, basically. But, so, together they sequenced nearly 100 domesticated and wild betta fish to compare. Independently, a second group of scientists at Nanchang University in China and at UC Berkeley began its own 15 years long study project on bettas, sequencing nearly 800 betta fish. There's links in the article, hyperlink, so I'm going to read some of what I read. Some of what I'm saying is coming out of the actual scientific scholarly articles. I'll link to these, and then the article links to the scientific journal if you want to read the actual details with the specific genes involved and all that, if you're into that. Both studies were recently posted as preprint outlines under review. The two teams independently combed through their fish genomes looking for any and every mutation that may correlate with a difference in looks or behavior. Both quickly homed in on a gene called DMRT1, whose sequence differed between domestic male and female betta fish. DMRT1 gene is linked to sexual determination in birds. Interesting. Remember, birds have the ZW thing going on instead of just XY going on too. So the DMRT1 essentially acts like a Y chromosome, and just one copy of the male version is enough to make a fish male. The teams did not see the same close correlation between the DMRT1 gene and the sex of wild bettas, however. This means that that gene functions independently of the chromosomes. But, and this is a big but, even domestic bettas with the DMRT1 gene, it was not a 100% determinative position of what sex they would be born as. Both teams noticed that still a small portion, up to 10% in some study groups, of the fish with the male, supposedly male, acting as kind of a secondary Y chromosome. So they thought, maybe the info from the Y chromosome just got kind of cut off and added on somewhere else. But it does the same thing wherever it is, right? Not so much. So actually, we're actually turning female up to 10% with that male DMTR1 gene. So in other words, some female fish were XY and some male fish were even XX. Totally scrambling any concept of sex or gender for that matter. Genetics alone does not determine sex in domestic betta fish. What other fish are like this? What other subpopulations are like this? The finding actually helps make sense of the offspring findings from the 1975 surgically sex-reversed bettas from 1975. Most of the females whose ovaries were removed must have started as XX females. The surgery, for some reason, triggered a switch to male. But a fish that was still genetically XX mating with other XX females could produce only XX babies, right? So scientists say that the all-female broods, that's why they were seeing almost all-female broods, because it could only produce XX. Given the imperfect sex determination scheme, a Y chromosome could have sometimes snuck in with one parent, which would have produced a mix of baby female and baby male bettas. So this is where you get females with a Y chromosome. What if not genetics influences sex in betta fish? Betta breeders who enter competitions akin to the Westminster Dog Show have swapped many theories: temperature, pH, even the age of the mother or father fish. Many have also noted that when females are kept together, one will turn into a male and take dominance. This goes back to what we were saying earlier. Without any surgical or hormonal intervention from humans whatsoever, this occurs. Is this just a stress response in captivity? Or is this something that life will find a way and it's going on in the natural world? So when Bodesky, there are so many doctors and scientists in this article, has polled an audience at a recent Thai beta breeder show, asking if they have personally seen adult females turn into males. Every single person at the show raised their hand, starting with one skeptical person slowly raising their hand, looking around, and slowly everyone else began to raise their hand. There's been a bunch of articles on this. I'll try to find some other ones, but just as a side note, that's kind of where we're going to end it today, just to tell you this is breaking news, such a huge topic, such a huge subject, really fascinating. It opens the floodgates on, if you've seen, like for instance, I've been telling people that scarlet bettas do this all the time. They're always turning male on me. This explains what could be going on partially, as well as any of the old explanations could still be valid too. We don't know. But the zebrafish, which is a very common lab animal, actually lost its sex chromosome through domestication. Without a sex chromosome, sex can become unpredictable, which turns into a problem when scientists want to perpetuate a particular line, like the zebra danio, for experiments. I know of colleagues who have lost mutant lines suddenly because there were no males or females being born at all anymore, said one betta fish breeder. Long ago might have ended up selecting that DMRT1 gene somewhere on the line, and it becomes unpredictable. If it moves from the X or Y chromosome, it becomes completely unpredictable. Males tend to fetch a higher price in pet stores because they are more ostentatious, more colorful, and their fins are larger. And they're also the ones they use for fighting in Thailand traditionally. For breeding, though, you need both sexes. One breeder told me that he actually prefers more females because he can cross one good male with a whole bunch of females, and if this problem happens, it's so common that they don't have a predictable line of babies or they have no males born, then he's got more choices. But just fascinating stuff. I know this is getting long, so I'll link any relevant stuff below. Also, if you like reading, if you like this kind of stuff, I highly suggest that you guys check out Audible. They are unofficially sponsoring my channel in that basically it's just a commission. If you try them out, Audible, you will, for free, if you're on Amazon already, they have all your info. So it's a branch of Amazon, but it's books on tape, all sorts. There's great books. I've got suggestions from The Dragon Behind the Glass, which is an incredible story about arowanas, the black market, murder, smuggling, and the exotic pet trade. And it's a good, crime drama, really. As well as just a good nerdy fish read also that's accessible. There's other things in there, from geology to world history and everything in between, so you'll find something you dig. But if you do the free trial, it gives $3 to my channel as a commission. Then you can cancel after 30 days. You get 2 free books, cancel it, that's it. If you decide to keep it, I think it's like $9 a month, and you get to keep those books, put them on whatever you want, no matter what, and the channel gets $6 then. So just a thought, if you haven't tried it and you want to try it, you want to help the channel out, but you don't got $3 on hand, but you'd like to toss $3 my way, it's one way you can do it. So there'll be a link below. Just click on it. It'll take you to the Audible page. You don't need to enter any codes. That's that. And lastly, if you like this content, let me know. Let me know what your theories on are, why this is happening, what in the world is going on, or also if you like Audible, if you have it, let me know that too, because if you guys have it and you're like, Alex, we don't like it, this isn't relevant, I'm going to cut it out. I'm just trying it out because trying to raise some money, get a better camera, get a better mic, you know? So that's what I've got for you guys today. I hope I earned your bell being rung on your subscription. If not, I'll try next time if there is a next time for you. But either way, I hope you guys have a great evening. I hope your fish keeping keeps you asking questions and in wonderment. And I hope you take care of your critters and the people around you because, you know, that will keep you happy. So take care of your plants, your fish, and the critters all around us known as humans. If you do that, you're going to be happier, and then if you take care of yourself, you can continue to take care of others. It's a big win-win. So let's keep the positivity going, people. I'll talk to you guys next time on The Secret History of Living in Your Aquarium. If you made it this far, you're a big old nerdy nerd McNerderson. Welcome to the club. See you next time. Have a good one, guys.